Well, shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Shabbat night service. It is September 8th, 2023, and we are excited about all that Jehovah is doing in the lives of his people, especially those that are involved in this study group. So, shalom. Listen to this music, let it speak to your hearts and your minds, and get it ready to receive all that the Ruach HaKodesh will speak to us on tonight. We don't own the rights to the music, but we have it just to block out all the cares of this world and allow the Spirit to speak to our spirit and to nourish us, energize us, and strengthen us to do all we were sent here to do. So shalom, and let this music fade. Can do all things but fail. Yes, we have lit the menorah, symbolic of the word coming forth and bringing us more and more light in the scriptures that we're going to go through on tonight. So it's for our good that we do this, and we love to do it. Can do things but fail. The creator of the universe spoke everything into existence. Told us the end, even before the beginning. Everything well. If we can just stop that, cut off our little boom box here. And I thought I was cutting it off, but I guess I gotta cut this off first. Technology, there we go. Technology is a mess. If you don't know it, I don't. It'll teach you as you go. There are things you cannot do. So once again, shalom. Welcome to our Shabbat night service. We are right about sundown, maybe another 30 minutes before sundown. So during this lesson, we will enter into Shabbat. And in about a month, it'll be, at this time of night, it will be dark, sundown. And the Bible says, and the evening and the morning was one day. So in the evening, when the sun goes down, is the beginning of another day. So, welcome to our Shabbat night service, our Bible study through the Torah in 1 year. This will be lesson 48, and we will get into that. As for now, let us pray and then get your communion elements together, for we will participate in Holy Communion on tonight. For our Messiah Yeshua told his disciples, of which we are, on that night before his death, do this in remembrance of me. When you gather in my name, do this in remembrance of him. And so let us pray, and then we're going to have our communion elements. Jehovah, our Elohim, creator of all things, we bless you and we praise you for this day. This is the day you have made. We rejoice. We are glad in it. We bless you for each and everything that you do. We thank you for your son, Yeshua HaMashiach, who came and reconciled us back to you. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, which Yeshua has sent to guide us on this journey to fulfill all that you have put in our hearts to do. So we thank you for this opportunity to study your word. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh that will guide us through this study, opening our hearts and minds to receive from this word all that you are saying to us. And in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray. Amen. All right, so with that, we are ready for our communion part of our service. For on the night before his death, Yeshua gathered his disciples. They were eating the meal, and he took bread and he broke it. Then he blessed the Father for the bread. In Hebrew, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'alom ha'motze lehem min ha'aretz. Blessed are you, Jehovah our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And then he took it and he passed it around. He said, take you and eat, for this is symbolic of my body that is broken just for you. Do this always in remembrance of me. And so we are obedient and we eat. Then he took the cup. We say it was the cup of redemption. He blessed the Father for the wine. In Hebrew, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'alom bori pari hagafim. Blessed are you, Jehovah our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth, who creates the fruits of the vine. Then he told them to all drink. Take this and drink, for this is symbolic of my blood. My blood that is shed for the remission of your sin and for a new covenant relationship with me. Do it often, always in remembrance of me. And so they all drank, and we in obedience drank. All right. We are obedient. And wherever you are obedient to what the word has instructed you to do, blessings flow. That's why he told us to do it, so that we would be blessed. So, with that, I clear my throat. With that, we're going to get into our shared screen and our lesson on tonight. And we'll get to our slideshow. And this is lesson 48, titled Shoftim, Shoftim, In Hebrew, that means judges. So we're going to get information about the order of society and how uh, Jehovah is the God of order. So Moshe, in speaking to the children of Israel, is giving them the understanding of how to establish cities and this land for the 12 tribes of Israel and also for the Levites. So there are going to be instructions for each group of people in this lesson on tonight. We're going to be in Deuteronomy 16, chapter, verse 18 through chapter 21, verse 9. Lesson 48 of 52 lessons that will get us through this Torah in 1 year's time. So we're getting very close to Sukkot. For on the 8th day of that 7-day festival, the new reading of the Torah begins all over again. And the people praise Jehovah for the opportunity to study for the word, for giving the word to Moshe to share with all mankind in the future, and our opportunity to go through year 4 in our attempt to study the Torah and see what we can glean from it, line upon line, precept upon precept. So with that, let's get into our introduction and begin our lesson on tonight. This week's reading is called Shoftim. Shoftim, and it addresses the fundamental issues pertaining to the leadership of the children of Israel. It begins with a discussion regarding the judges, Shoftim, and later gives rules pertaining to kings, prophets, and Kohanim or priests. So we know that the title of the lesson is found in the first words of that lesson. So we'll see that when we get to the text of Devarim or Deuteronomy. Moses tells the people to appoint judges in every city of Israel. These judges are instructed to adjudicate fairly. Capital punishment is prescribed for idolatry, and various idolatrous practices are also banned. We're going to learn about sacrifices that offered to Jehovah must be free of blemish. Now, much of this is contained in the book of Leviticus. So, Vayikra is an understanding of the ordering of society, the sacrificial system, how it's going to be operated. So now in Moses giving his farewell address, he begins to bring in these things that he is teaching, these words that he's teaching in this Torah, so that they will remember them. The people must follow the rulings of the judges in the Sanhedrin. Going to speak about that, when the judges are ruling in a just and fair manner, then Jehovah reminds the people to accept the judgment. And if it's a bigger case that the judges could not adjudicate, then they go to the 70-member Sanhedrin or the council of elders of this body. And it says a minimum of 2 witnesses are required to secure a conviction in a case involving capital or corporal punishment. So whenever that happens, there's got to be at least 2 witnesses. That's why the word will tell us, from the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses, let it be established. So you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses in order for corporal punishment to be given as a punishment for an individual for a crime that he has committed. Individuals who testify falsely are liable to receive the punishment that they sought to have imposed upon their innocent victim. So you're not going to get up there, put your hand, as men want to do today, put his hand on the Bible and then lie. Why? Because if you're convicted of perjury, now you can get punishment for perjury. However, in this case, whatever the punishment that would have been given to that person, based on your false testimony, that punishment goes to you. So you give somebody life without parole, and you want to make absolutely certain that what you're saying is the truth. Because if it's found that it wasn't, you will serve out the terms of that situation. You will pay the fines involved in that situation. So then he goes on and says, before waging battle against an enemy, the people are commanded to make a peaceful overture. Only if the enemy does not accept the offer does battle ensue. Now, this is not inside the land of Israel. That's the nations around them that get that opportunity. But in the land of Israel, judgment's already been given. So you're going in there to carry out judgment against the people of that land that Jehovah has given you as a replacement for them. So let us get into our lesson on tonight. Deuteronomy 16, starting with verse 18. He says, you are to appoint judges, right there, judges, Shoftim, and officers for all your gates. So he's setting the order of how things will work. You will build their cities, but there's always rulership and a group of people coming together to decide what is going on inside of that city. That city that Jehovah your Elohim is giving you, tribe by tribe. And they are to judge the people with righteous judgment. You are not to distort justice or show favoritism. You are not to accept a bribe. So Moshe is telling them, these are the things that are required of these cities that the children of Israel are going to get this land, and there are going to be a lot of agriculture around the land, but there will always be a city or a place, a wall place for the people to come should there be an enemy trying to come in and destroy them. They will have a place that they can go and assemble a walled city and defend themselves. So he says, you are not to accept a bribe, for a gift blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of even the upright. So money is the pursuit of money is the cause of all wickedness. We'll find out when you get, that's why they say when you want to find out about somebody lying or doing something wrong, follow the money. And you'll find out what's going on. He goes on and says, only justice you must pursue, so that you will live and inherit the land Jehovah your Elohim is giving you. So Jehovah is saying, this is what you have to do. Then he'll give you understanding about that. Now he's getting into verse 21. You are not to plant any sort of tree as a sacred pole beside the altar of Jehovah, your Elohim, that you will make for yourself. So in other words, you're going to build this tabernacle. Don't be planting no trees in there symbolic of anything, because that's what the nations that are being dispossessed began to do. So he says you are not to do that. Likewise, do not set up a standing stone, or this big stone representative of the place we will gather. The place you gather is at the gates of the city or at the tabernacle. These are places that you are together. So he says, do not set up standing stone, for Jehovah your Elohim hates such things, because when he's telling you this is what you will do, you will do this. So if he tells you not to do it, it is because without obedience, you will disobey and do this. And this is what is represented up until that point in time. Never being designed by Jehovah for that to take place. But from this point on, you're going to be the ones that are going to teach the world what it is you are supposed to do. Then we get into chapter 17. You are not to sacrifice to Jehovah your Elohim. Oh my goodness, forgot my pointer. a cow or a sheep that has a defect or anything wrong with this. This goes right back to Leviticus and the sacrificial system. That would be an abomination to Jehovah your Elohim. So when you're doing things like that, he'll tell you what's going to happen to you for that disobedience, because he's already telling you, do not do that. Why? Because Yeshua is going to be our sacrificial lamb, and he has to be without sin. So no spot or wrinkle on any animal was to be sacrificed to Jehovah. If there is found among you within any of your gates that Jehovah your Elohim gives you, a man or woman who does what your Elohim sees as wicked, transgressing his covenant by going and serving other gods and worship in the Holy Land, this is what he's telling you. You are not to do that. Anything in relationship to the sun, the moon, or anything in the sky, something he has forbidden, and it is told to you or you hear about it, then you ought to investigate the matter diligently. If it is true, if it is confirmed that such detestable things are being done in Israel, then you ought to bring that man or woman who has done this wicked thing to your city gates and stone that man or woman to death. So now the ones who are witness that this did take place are the ones who began the stoning process. And then all the leaders and the people gathered to stone. And why is that? He says the death sentence is to be carried out only if there was testimony, once again, of 2 or 3 witnesses. He may not be sentenced to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. The witnesses are to be the first to stone him to death. So they're going to be the first ones to pick up stones and throw at this person once the judges have ruled that the person is guilty. He says afterwards, all the people are to stone him. Thus you will put an end to this wickedness among you. Now Jehovah's saying you're going to do this. When you do it, this is what you ought to do to that person. Somebody is going to try to do what the people that are been there, and some things that they think might be valid, they're going to do it. So Jehovah is giving the judgment and the punishment for that kind of behavior. If a case comes before you at your city gate, which is too difficult for you to judge, concerning bloodshed, civil suit, personal injury, or any other controversial issue, you ought to get up, go to the place which Jehovah your Elohim will choose. Now, in some cases, if it's a matter that can be adjudicated in the village of the Levites who are surrounding the city, but there are 3 places where the Levites are called cities of refuge, you go there. If it can't be settled there, then you're going to go to the what? The place which Jehovah your Elohim will choose, which will be Jerusalem, where the temple was, and appear before the priests, who are Levites, and the judge in office at the time. Seek their opinion, and they will render a verdict for you. So now this is a matter you're not quite sure what you ought to do. Then you go to the house of refuge, where there are judges living in the city, where the teachers of the people are. You go, but if they can't handle it, then they will take it to what will end up being Jerusalem. All right, with that, we go on. Verse 10. And I'm just about there. Got to get my papers together. All right. He says, you will then act according to what they have told you, there in that place which Jehovah will choose. That lets you know that when you're doing things in line with what he said, then he's there. You ought to take care to act according to all their instruction. So he's telling the people now, when judgment comes from this group, it is to be administered fairly. It has been administered fairly, and this will happen. The punishment will go forth. the judgment they render. He says, not turning aside to the right or the left from the verdict they declare to you. So when you get, that's the judgment. There's nothing left. Anyone presumptuous enough not to pay attention to the priest appointed there to serve Jehovah your Elohim or to the judge, that person must die. So now you can be killed for this lack of understanding of the system that Jehovah has established, because he's in it from the very beginning, because it's a system that he has established. He says, thus you will exterminate such wickedness from Israel. All the people will hear about it and be afraid to continue acting presumptuously. When you have entered the land Jehovah your Elohim is giving, you have taken possession of it and are living there. You may say, I want to have a king over me. Now, this is the word that Moshe is telling the people at a time when he's prophesying what Jehovah has told him they would do. You will say, I want to have a king over me, like all the other nations around me. So 1 Samuel goes very much into that, as Samuel was told by the people that he was about to die and they didn't trust his sons. So they wanted a king. And Samuel had to deal with that, and he told him he was angry that you would even ask for a king. But Jehovah told him to accept what they're saying, basically because this is what they are requesting of you. They're rejecting me and my ability to appoint someone in your place, because basically your sons ain't no good. All right? But they are in effect, what? Rejecting me. Why? Because right here in the book of Devarim, in Deuteronomy, we see Moshe prophesying that they were going to want that. He said, you must appoint as king the one whom Jehovah your Elohim will choose. So he chose, and the first king was Saul. He must be one of your kinsmen, can't be from some other land. This king you appoint over you, you are forbidden to appoint a foreigner over you who is not your kinsman. So in other words, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. However, he is not to acquire many horses. Why? Because horses were symbolic of a large and mighty army. And the people were always to be reminded that Jehovah was there in obedience. He would fight for them and with them. Told you, he said, for himself, or have the people return to Egypt to obtain more horses. Inasmuch as Jehovah told you never to go back that way again. Well, they violated that continually. Likewise, he is not to acquire many wives for himself. It's fascinating because Solomon, who was considered the wisest man ever, violated both of these commands that Jehovah gave through Moshe. Both of these. Acquire massive numbers of horses, built massive stables, and had 1,000 wives and concubines, so that his heart will not turn away, and he is not to acquire excessive quantities of gold and silver. Another thing that Solomon did when he was king, he got massive wealth. So then he did not need Jehovah. So he violated all three of these. He was the third king. David, second king. Saul, first king. By the time of the third king, he had messed up. He had violated all of this. Let's go on. No wonder Jehovah was. I mean, he told them what was going to happen. And right after the death of Solomon, the land was broken and divided in two. We go on. When he has come to occupy the throne of his kingdom. Now, this is what he tells you. This is what you're supposed to do. He told you what you're not supposed to do. Then he tells you what you're supposed to do. He said you are to write a copy of this Torah for himself in a scroll. So he is to write a copy. He is to spend his time writing a copy of the Torah. That's making sure he's going to be in it every day, studying it before he comes to sit on the throne and make decisions. And he's going to have the what? The Kohanim, or the priests and the Levites, there to help him write it down exactly as it is. It is to remain with him, and he is to read in it every day as long as he lives. So this is what the king is supposed to do. Become very familiar with the law of the land, so that he will learn to fear Jehovah his Elohim and keep all the words of this Torah and these laws and obey them, so that he will not think he is better than his kinsmen, and so that he will not turn aside either to the right or to the left from the commands. In this way, he will prolong his own reign and that of his children in Israel. So you see the power that this king would have, and how the proper exercise of that power comes from an understanding of this Torah. And he's going to read it and write it until he has completed it. And no matter how long he is king, he's supposed to go and study this Torah. So it'll be in his room, a copy of this Torah that he has written himself. And the scribes and the priests are going to make sure that it is copied line upon line and precept upon precept. Next, chapter 18. The Kohanim and the Levites, and indeed the whole tribe of Levi, is not to have a share or an inheritance with Israel. Instead, their support will come from the food offered by fire to Jehovah and from whatever else becomes his. They will have no inheritance with their brothers, because Jehovah is their inheritance, as he has said to them. Remember, the people are the inheritance of Jehovah, and the land is the inheritance of the people. So right here, the Levites, the ones that are dedicated to the knowledge of the Torah, to the sacrificial system, to the system of judges and all judicial bodies, they are the ones who are going to teach that to the people, and therefore their total time is to be dedicated to that cause. Verse 3, the priests, the Kohanim, will have the right to receive from the people, from those offering a sacrifice, whether an ox or a sheep, the shoulder, the jowls, and the stomach. You will also give him the first fruits of your grain, new wine, and olive oil, and the first of the fleece for your sheep. So now he's telling them that that tenth, you got 11 tribes bringing a tenth continuously. Then that's 110%. And then of the 10% that is brought, we learned in Leviticus that the priests, the Levites, also tithe. Now the high priest and his descendants do not, but the Levites tithe what they have been given back to the priest to make sure that those in the family of the high priest, the priestly line, are taken care of. He goes on, for Jehovah your Elohim has chosen him from all your tribe, the Levites, to stand and serve in the name of Jehovah, him and his sons forever. If a Levite from one of your towns anywhere in Israel where he is living comes, highly motivated to the place which Jehovah will choose, because they were given a schedule. And David helped establish once again this schedule that the Levites would have in the temple, or at that time, the tabernacle. It says, then he will serve there in the name of Jehovah, his Elohim. He has felt that I want to stay forever in this place. Then that is to be allowed. He will serve there in the presence of Jehovah. We continue in chapter 18. He goes on. Such a Levite will receive the same share as the ones who are on duty there, in addition to what he may receive from selling his inheritance. And so, now he doesn't have necessarily property, but there are some personal things that he would be able to sell. Maybe as a craftsman or whatever he was doing along with his priestly duties, he can sell that. He says, when you enter the land, verse 9, Jehovah your Elohim is giving you, you are not to learn how to follow the abominable practices of those other nations that they're displacing. There must not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire. This was the baby killing of babies to the god Molech. There can't be a diviner, a soothsayer, an enchanter, a sorcerer, a spellcaster, a consulter of ghosts or spirits, or a necromancer, talking to the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to Jehovah, and because of these abominations, Jehovah your Elohim is driving these people out of the land ahead of you. He said, you must be wholehearted. Don't bring in mixtures of this stuff from these people. Your whole focus must be on the Torah and what Jehovah has instructed you to do. For these nations which you are about to dispossess have soothsayers, diviners, but you, Jehovah your Elohim, does not allow you to do such a thing. You're going to be the one that's going to teach their other non-believers of what it is to be a child of God. So you don't get involved in that. Then we get into this very important section, because Moshe is prophesying. He says, Jehovah will raise up for you a prophet like me from among yourself. He's not going in, but at some point, a prophet just like him from your own kinsmen. He says you ought to pay attention to him. Just as when you were assembled at Horeb and requested Jehovah your Elohim, don't let me hear the voice of Jehovah my Elohim anymore, or let me see this great fire ever again. If I do, I will die. So that's what the children of Israel said. On that occasion, Jehovah said to Moshe, they are right in what they're saying. They were not ready. He says, but let them know I will raise up for them like you. He will be the same type of prophet as you are, going to speak the truth. The words coming from his mouth will be true, just like what you're saying. I have by my presence over the tent of meeting that what you are saying to them comes from me. Well, signs and wonders followed who? Yeshua, HaMashiach. They should have been able to go back and understand that again. For he said in verse 17, on that occasion, they write, I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their kinsmen. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I order him. The same thing Moshe was doing. Whoever doesn't listen to my words, which he will speak in my name, will have to account for himself to me. So now when you don't receive Yeshua as Messiah, he said he was, then you're going to have to account at the seat of judgment. You're going to have to account for that. Now, there could be all kind of thoughts about what that was talking about. But right after that, Moshe tells them, but if a prophet presumptuously speaks a word in my name, which I didn't order him to say, it won't be authenticated. Or if he speaks in the name of other gods, then that prophet must die. You may be wondering, How are we to know if a word has not been spoken by Jehovah? He says, when a prophet speaks in the name of Jehovah and the prediction does not come true, that is, the word is not fulfilled, then Jehovah did not speak that word. The prophet who said it spoke it presumptuously. You have nothing to fear. In other words, don't pay no attention to him. In some cases, he must die. But in this situation, judge him on what happened. And if what he says doesn't come to bear, you don't listen to him anymore because he spoke presumptuously. Chapter 19. When Jehovah your Elohim cuts off the nations whose land Jehovah your Elohim is giving you, and you take their place and settle in their cities and houses, you are to set aside 3 cities for yourselves in your land that Jehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess. Divide the territory of your land, which Jehovah your Elohim is having you inherit, into 3 parts and prepare the roads. These are going to be the cities of refuge, so that any killer can flee to these cities. That was the place where the Levites would be. So if some killer, he's going to explain in verse 4, the killer who will live if he flees there is someone who has killed his fellow member of the community by mistake. The judges are going to determine that because this is a place of refuge for him. He's saying, I didn't do it. Well, okay, well, hold on. Let us investigate. You're safe here. No harm can come to you here. But we're going to investigate and make sure you didn't do it. Verse 5. An example would be if a man goes into the forest with his neighbor to cut wood and takes a stroke with the axe to fell a tree. But the head of the axe flies off the handle, hits his neighbor, and kills him. Then he is to flee to one of these cities and live there. And he has to stay there for as long as the high priest is alive. Don't go back, because if you leave this city, it's on you. Let's go on. Moshe says, otherwise, in the heat of his anger, may pursue the killer, overtake him, because the distance to the city of refuge, that's why they're making these roads, is long, and strike him dead, even though he didn't deserve to die. You don't believe him, but he's going to ask his executioner, inasmuch as he hadn't hated him in the past. It was an accident. This is why I am ordering you to set aside for yourselves 3 cities, both sides of the Jordan. 3 cities. You're going to build roads to make sure everybody knows where that is, and there's no excuse if a person gets there without a trial. You are not to bother that person. If Jehovah your Elohim gives you your territory as he swore to your ancestors that he would, and gives you all the land he promised to give to your ancestors, provided you keep and observe all these commands I am giving you today, loving Jehovah your Elohim and always following his way, obeying his commandments, then you ought to add 3 more cities. In other words, they could have had more land than just on the west side of the Jordan, because the original plan would be to give land on the east side of the Jordan all the way to the Euphrates River, as well as it been around. So all of that land would have been given to them, provided they observed all the commands, but they never did. They never even took all the land they were supposed to, and drove all the people out on the west side of the Jordan. Verse 10, so that innocent blood will not be shed in the land Jehovah your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance, and thus blood guilt be on you. However, verse 11, if someone hates his fellow member of the community, lies in wait for him, attacks him, strikes him a death blow, and then flees into one of these cities, then the leaders of his own town are to send and bring him back from there and hand him over to the next of kin avenger to be put to death. He's not going to kill him, but he's going to be the one to throw one of the first stones to stone him. The judges that were going to adjudicate the matter will be the next one, and then everybody else will pick up a stone and stone him. You are not to pity him. Rather, you must put an end to the shedding of innocent blood in Israel. Then things will go well with you. Verse 14, you are not to move your neighbor's boundary marker from the place where people put it when the land is divided long ago in the inheritance soon to be yours in the land Jehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess. So the land is going to be divided up, and then the judges, of course, for the leaders of that city, will then put markers there to put the boundaries of that particular place. So they will do that, and no one is to move that. They are to honor what that marker is. He goes on and reminds them, one witness alone will never suffice, will not be sufficient to convict a person of any offense or sin of any kind. That matter will be established only if there are 2 or 3 witnesses testifying against him. Once again, making certain that justice is the main aspect of the people of Israel. He goes on, if a malicious witness comes forward and gives false testimony against someone, then both the men involved in the controversy are to stand before Jehovah, before the priests and the judges in office at that time. So both the men involved in the controversy are going to be there, and these people giving testimony. The judges are to investigate carefully. If they find that the witness is lying and has given false testimony against his brother, you are to do to him what he intended to do to his brother. If lashes were coming, this person was going to get lashes. If the death penalty was coming, this person could be killed. And this way, Jehovah says, you will put an end to such wickedness as lying. Thou shalt not bear false witness among you. Those who remain will hear about it, be afraid, and no longer commit such wickedness among you. You can't get bought off. If the judgment goes against you and you're going to get what they were supposed to get, you know, no, I don't, no, I'm still, no, I didn't see anything, or I did see, and this is what I saw. Because if it's found out you're lying, then it says, show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, the value. You'll pay the fine, 2 for 2, hand for hand, foot for foot. There were values placed on these particular parts of a human being based on the amount of work that person couldn't do. So if you were this person was going to have to pay a fine because he had hurt that person to that degree, you lie, you would pay the fine. The fine would be accrued to you as well as to that person. He says in chapter 20, when you go out to fight your enemies and see horses, chariots, and a force larger than yours, you are not to be afraid of them, because Jehovah your Elohim, who brought you up from the land of Egypt, is with you. So you're not going to be afraid of anyone. I don't care how big that army looks. You got to go in there with the understanding that Jehovah is with us, and we're going to take them out. When you're about to go into battle, the priest is to come forward and address the people. He should tell them, listen, Israel, you are about to do battle against your enemies. Don't be faint-hearted or afraid. Don't be alarmed or frightened by them, because Jehovah your Elohim is going with you to fight on your behalf against your enemies and give you victory. He's going with you, and he's going to fight on your behalf. You still going to fight, but he's going with you, and he's going to fight on your behalf. Verse 5. Then the officials will speak to the soldiers. These are the leaders, the dedicated leaders that are not soldiers. They are to say, is there a man here who has built a new house but hasn't dedicated it yet? That means he's probably gotten married and hasn't had an opportunity to occupy it with his wife. he should go back home now. Otherwise, he may die fighting and another man will dedicate it. So the leaders are telling him this. So he's not going to go back and get no flack about it, because they're going to go back and basically co-sign. This is what this man needs to do according to what? The Torah, the commands of Jehovah. He goes on in verse 7. Is there a man here who is engaged to a woman but hasn't married her yet? He should go back home. Otherwise, he may die fighting and another man will marry her. In other words, he's going to get an opportunity to what? Sleep with her and plant his seed to carry on his name. The officials will then add to what they have said to the soldiers, is there a man here who is afraid and faint-hearted? He should go back home, otherwise his fear may demoralize his comrades as well. I can imagine that didn't happen too often, because the leaders have to explain why you not fighting. And being scared is not something you want to get back to the community that you're a part of. He says when the official has finished speaking with the soldiers, commanders are to be appointed to lead the army. So now all these leaders and the priests have spoken to them and encouraged them. Now the leaders are going to encourage them. When you advance on a town to attack it, first offer it terms for peace. Not in the land of Israel. This is the surrounding territories. If the people of that land accept the term for peace and open its gates to you, then all the people there are to be put to forced labor and work for you. They become what? Slaves of yours. However, if they refuse to make peace with you, to make war against you, you are to put it under siege. When Jehovah your Elohim hands it over to you, now you gonna win. You are to put every male to the sword. However, you are to take as booty for yourself the women, the little ones, and the livestock. All the males are going to be killed, and everything in the city, all its spoils. We also know that this could also include married women. So only the virgins and the very young women could, in fact, be saved. Yes, he said, you will feed on your enemy's spoil. You take all their spoil, which Jehovah your Elohim has given you. This is what you are to do in all the towns which are at a great distance from you, which are not the towns of these nations. So this is for land outside of the land of Israel. Verse 16. As for the towns of these peoples, which Jehovah your Elohim is giving you as your inheritance, you are not to allow anything that breathes to live. Rather, you must destroy them completely. That's inside the land. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as Jehovah your Elohim has ordered you, so that they won't teach you to follow their abominable practices, which they do for their gods, thus causing you to sin against Jehovah your Elohim. You're going to wipe them out. Judgment has been given. Jehovah says, go and wipe them out. Don't make any alliances. Wipe them out. Don't try to find out what they were doing to their God. You do what the Torah tells you to do in relationship to the God of all flesh, Jehovah our Elohim. He goes on. When in making war against a town in order to capture it, you lay siege to it for a long time. You are not to destroy its trees, cutting them down with an axe. You can eat their fruit. So he's basically talking about most of the fruit trees. You don't destroy them because you can eat that. So don't cut them down. After all, are the trees in the field human beings so that you have to besiege them too? You don't have to act like they're human. These are trees and they provide sustenance. They're fulfilling their function in regard to creation. He says, however, if you know that certain trees provide no food, you may destroy them and cut them down in order to build siege works or these ramps or whatever you're going to need, ladders, against the town, making war with you until it falls. So you're not going, This is in the land. Don't destroy trees. Once you get rid of all the people, you kill all them, you can eat off those trees. So this is just common sense for you not to think that you're supposed to do other than honor Jehovah's creation. Trees, okay. They're designed to be what? They fulfill their purpose in giving shade, being food. I mean, not being food, but being wood for the fire, wood for home. So you're going to cut them down anyway. But not anything that bears fruit. If in the land Jehovah, chapter 21, as we complete our lesson, if in the land Jehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess, a murder victim is found lying in the countryside, and the perpetrator or the murderer is not known, then your leaders and judges are to go out and measure the distance between it, the body, and the surrounding towns. After it has been determined which town is the closest, the leaders of that town are to take a young female cow that has never been put to work or yoked for and used as a draft animal. In other words, you most likely are going to sacrifice this animal. He says, go on. The leaders are to bring the heifer down to a valley with a stream in it that never dries up to a place that is neither plowed nor sown, and they are to break the cow's neck there in the valley or in the valley area near the stream. The Kohen or the priests and the Levites are to approach in that area, for Jehovah your Elohim has chosen them to serve him and to pronounce blessings in the name of Jehovah. So this murder has taken place. Blood has been shed. These are going to investigate and find out what happens. If they can never find out what happened, then what they're doing is saying to Jehovah, we investigated, we couldn't find out who has done this, but we are to be free from the shedding of this blood. He goes on. All the leaders of the town nearest the murder victim are to wash their hands over the cow whose neck was broken in the valley. Then they are to speak up and say, this blood was not shed by our hands, nor have we seen who did it. Jehovah, forgive your people Israel, whom you redeemed. Do not allow innocent blood to be shed among your people Israel. So we didn't find out who did it. We don't know. And he says, and they will be forgiven this bloodshed. Thus, you will banish the shedding of innocent blood from among you by doing what Jehovah sees is right, not what you have conjured up in your own mind. What Jehovah has explained to you is what he sees as right. And that's the tack you are supposed to take. And just one closing note, the prophet Isaiah says, you are my witnesses, says Jehovah. We are the witnesses charged with the responsibility. Once we learn this, we are to do it and we are to teach others. We are the witnesses charged with the responsibility to testify and reveal the truth of Jehovah throughout the earth. We're supposed to go what? Into all the earth, teaching the good news about Yeshua HaMashiach and the Torah of our Father Jehovah. He goes on. Our spiritual task as witnesses contains both dimensions, clarifying, teaching, and establishing, doing. We serve as clarifying witnesses. We teach this word. When we recognize the presence of Jehovah in the magnificent universe he created, our relationship with Jehovah, the first 5 of the 10 commandments is our relationship with Jehovah. When we are teaching this to other people, to recognize Jehovah as the God of all flesh, then we are establishing Jehovah in this magnificent universe he created. And when we remind ourselves and others of the good inheritance in the world and within people. So it's going to teach us how we are to address Jehovah and one another. So this concludes our lesson for tonight. thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have gotten something from this lesson. Forgot my priestly blessing. Okay. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May his countenance shine upon you and bring you peace. That is our blessing for tonight. I got something else on here that I ain't even supposed to have. So that's where my notes were supposed to go. So thank you all so much. We will be blessed as we are obedient to what the Spirit will speak into our hearts on tonight. So we thank you so much for joining me with this opportunity to study the Torah and get through it in 1 year and be blessed and start again. Shalom.